There are a lot of different kinds of driving games. You've got the super realistic sims like Gran Turismo, the arcadey fast drivers like Need for Speed, and then you have the types of games you play when a switch goes off in your head and you are hungry for destruction and chaos. That is where today's game comes in. A driving adventure all about going around tracks with no respect and taking wacky vehicles into demolition derbies. Here is my review of Wreckfest for the Nintendo Switch. When it comes to gameplay, this is a 3D driving game with a lot of damage physics and a mixture of off-road and tarmac racing. Across the game, you'll be driving a myriad of vehicles on tracks and within arenas with two goals. Be in first place and utterly annihilate everybody else around you by any means necessary. Now, first of all, the Switch version of Wreckfest is not a complete edition. It only comes with the base library of vehicles, leaving all the extras like the bumper car and Jeep Wrangler up to DLC you have to go on the eShop and buy separately. This is a bit weird as a complete edition already exists for other platforms, though the PlayStation 5 version of the game that released last year also didn't have the DLC built in. As far as game modes go, you've got career mode for much of the unlocking of vehicles and upgrades, along with a custom event mode that lets you pick and choose what and where you want to do. There's also tournament and multiplayer where you can go online and play with other Switch players from around the world or work towards the tournament mode's daily and weekly objectives, with some vehicles only available in that mode's rep shop. Outside of that, you've got Garage where you can buy and modify vehicles. We'll get a bit more into that later. Career mode is what you'll be doing the most, so let's dive into that. It's divided into 5 categories or tiers of events. You start with regional juniors and work your way up, getting progression points for each event completed, and once you reach a certain threshold you unlock the next category, and keep going until you've unlocked the entire campaign. These events are mostly divided up between individual races and the demolition derby. There are different variations on these, like one-on-one races to unlock a particular vehicle or derbies that allow only one vehicle type to participate, but it's pretty much gonna be one of these two for the entire game. Now, a race is exactly what you'd expect. You and 15 other vehicles driving around a track aiming to get first place. Where the game gets really interesting though is the demolition derby. Putting you and a bunch of other cars into a fairgrounds arena, having you ram into and crash each other, trying to destroy everyone and be the last vehicle standing. And that's what makes this game so much fun. You've got a wacky lineup of vehicles on top of a very loose and chaotic damage and physics system. Cars drift to the side and topple, making it very easy to ram into and launch a vehicle into a spin to do damage. It also doesn't help that some events will have you in this little reliant super van against a massive armor-plated school bus. Speaking of, let's talk about the roster. There are a lot of pretty interesting car picks as just regular cars you can drive around, from the 68 Ford Mustang to the 78 Chevy Blazer. But you've also got a bunch of wacky and really goofy vehicles that shouldn't be anywhere near a racing game. You start the game off driving a simple riding lawnmower and can work your way up to a couch on wheels, an RV motorhome, and diving into the DLC can get you a bumper car and an outhouse on wheels. It's just a lot of goofy fun to go into a race with these clearly not for racing joke vehicles. Now, as you finish the events, you'll gain experience and money. Money lets you purchase new vehicles and upgrades from the garage on the main menu, whereas XP will let you increase your level and rank, unlocking new vehicles and upgrades for purchase. Now, some of these upgrades are universal for everything, while others are vehicle specific. And that brings us to customization. Almost every vehicle can be upgraded and tuned. Upgrades are in the form of parts that increase performance, add armor, and change cosmetics. Performance parts are mostly there to modify the acceleration, top speed, and cornering of the vehicle to help with the actual driving, whereas armor will change the vehicle with different bumpers, side panels, etc., making it heavier, losing performance and cornering, but gaining a lot of strength and defense with ramming and wrecking other vehicles. In other words, you put a lot of armor up if you're going to go into a demolition derby and want to annihilate the competition, but you want to take that armor off and make yourself lighter if you're going through a race. Now let's get to the driving itself. It'll feel a bit arcadey and loose with the steering. This is partially because of the environment you drive on. Almost all tracks in the game are at least partially covered in dirt in off-road terrain. There is the occasional 100% tarmac track, but almost all of your driving will be reliant on braking and drifting on dirt. You also need to worry about how much power you give your vehicle. Throwing all the power possible for the Jeep Wrangler will help you whiz past opponents on tarmac, but will cause chaotic and uncontrollable flying on the hilly dirt tracks. The physics and damage also come into play here. As you crash and get rammed into, your car will heavily change with doors falling off, engines catching on fire, and you just become an unrecognizable shell of a vehicle. But damaging certain parts will change how the vehicle will handle. Take enough damage on one side and your steering will be off or push away from you entirely. And there's a lot of risk here even in races with how many of the tracks are designed. You're not just going through an oval track all the time. Sometimes you'll have figure eights where every single lap has a couple little intersections you go through and you don't know if you're going to get through that intersection fine or get rammed into, leading to a huge pileup. And as far as difficulty goes, I would say this game is moderately hard. As long as you keep changing vehicles and upgrades, the AI will always be close behind, but knowing the track will lead you to easy victories. And if you remember this game's original launch, the awful rubber banding from 2018 and 2019 has long since been fixed. There is definitely a bit of rubber banding going on here, but it's pretty slight and works both ways. Overall, I think the game comes together pretty well. The driving is a lot of fun and each race is short enough that it can be played in small pick up and play bursts. The game has a pretty nice amount of content and length as well. I didn't unlock the final category of career mode until I'd been playing for well over 15 hours. And there's replayability with the tournament mode's daily and weekly challenges. Next up is presentation. Wreckfest on the Switch looks pretty decent. There are some jaggies here and there, and some tree models do look a bit flat when you look at them in photo mode, but the vehicles and environments all look pretty good. A bit more jaggy in handheld mode, but not that bad. And performance is great. It stays at a steady 30 FPS all the time in docked or handheld mode. The only issues I found were occasional crashes when navigating the tournament mode menus and when trying to equip roof toppers for the Jeep Wrangler. The toppers were fine for other vehicles from the base game and DLC, but every time I navigate the menu with the Jeep specifically, it automatically crashes. That's all I've got for presentation, so let's go on to battery life. On the original model, Wreckfest gets a battery range of 2 hours and 12 up to 2 hours and 48. The Nintendo Switch Lite gets a range of 2 hours and 38 up to 3 hours and 12. The Red Boxer V2 2019 model gets a range of 5 hours and 32 up to 6 hours and 17. And the OLED model gets a range of 6 hours and 5 up to 7 hours and 11. In conclusion, Wreckfest has arrived on the Switch and provides a whole lot of chaos and destruction in handheld form. Now on the downside, the DLC not being built in is a bummer, along with the DLC topper issue with the Jeep. Outside of that, it's a pretty darn good port of a pretty darn good driving game with destructible everything. Reviews to Go rates Wreckfest for the Nintendo Switch an 8.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.